We will begin the service in memory of Rabbi Meir Moskowitz. With Tehillim recited by a number of special rabbis who were close to him, Rabbi Andrew Moskowitz, Rabbi Chaim Steinmetz, and Rabbi Roy Feldman from KJ, Rabbi Josh Goller, and Rabbi Kenneth Aumann. They will be followed by eulogies, hopefully brief, by a number of essentially family members. Those who are not family were family. I will begin, and then Rabbi Joshua Baxt, Ruchi Winkler, Avi Moskowitz, Yoel Moskowitz, John Gerstel, representing his incredible mother, Barbara, Isaac Winkler, and then grandchildren, Samantha and Noah Moskowitz, and finally, Rabbi Josh Hess. I think Meir would have made a joke out of this list. I don't know exactly what he would have said, but I am sure he would have both smiled and been very happy with the choice of speakers. We'll start with Rabbi Moskowitz. Yeah. Okay.
While there are typical chapters of Tehillim to recite at a funeral, allow me to go a little bit off script here this morning in honor of Saba, who was not your typical person in so many ways, and you'll hear about that from everybody. I'm going to recite Tehillim Kuf Yud Ches, chapter 118, which is a chapter of Hallel. Spending so many Siddurim with him, the only way that I recite this chapter of Tehillim in Hallel, as part of Hallel, is hearing Saba's voice in the background, sitting and leading all of our Siddurim. And most notably, the pasuk which, to me, symbolized so much of his life, Lo Amus, Ki Echya, I shall not die, rather I will live, Va'asaper, Ma'aseka, I'll spend my life with a relationship speaking about the praises of God. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki l'olam chazdo. Yomerna Yisrael, ki l'olam chazdo. Yomerna ves Aaron, ki l'olam chazdo. Yomerna Yirei Adonai, ki l'olam chazdo. Mina mesa karasiya anani b'merchavya. Adonai li lo ira, maya seli adam. Adonai li ba'ozrai, v'ani areh b'sonai. Tov lachasos b'Adonai, mi betoach ba'adam. Tov lachasos ba'Adonai, mi betoach b'ndivim. Kogo yim sivavuni, b'shem Adonai ki amilam. Sabuni gam sivavuni, b'shem Adonai ki amilam. Sabuni ki dvorim dachu ke'ish kotzim, b'shem Adonai ki amilam. Dacho dechisani linpol, v'Adonai azarani. Ozi v'zimrasya, v'ahili liyeshua. Korina v'yeshua ba'olei tzadikim, Yimin Adonai osachayo. Yimin Adonai romema, Yimin Adonai osachayo. Lo amus ki echyeh. Vasaper ma'aseya. Yasor yisirani ya. Velamaves lo nesanani. Pisruli sharei tzedek avavam odeya. Ze ashar l'Adonai tzadikim yavo uvo. Odecha ki anisani. Vatehili lishua. Even masu abonim. Haisa l'rosh pina. Me'es Adonai haisa zos, hi niflaos be'enenu. Zeh hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha bo. Ana Adonai Hoshiana, Ana Adonai Tzlichana. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, barachnuchem b'beis Adonai. El Adonai v'ya'er lanu, Isur chag bavosim, ad karnus hamizbeach. Eli ata v'odeka, Elohai arom b'meka. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binostesha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchos yinahaleni. Nafshi yishovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek l'man shemo. Gam ki elech b'geitz hamaves, lo yirara ki ata imadi, shivtacho mishantecha, hemei nachmuni, taroch l'fanei shulchan neged zorai, dishanta v'Hashem roshi kosi revayah. Ach tov v'chesed yudafuni kol yimei chayai v'shafti b'veis Adonai li'orech yamim.
אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך בעצת רשעים, ובדרך חטאים לא עמד, ובמושב ליצים לא ישב. כי אם בתורת אדוני חפצו, ובתורתו יהגה יומם ולילה. והיה כעץ שתול על פלגי מים, אשר פריו ייתן בעיתו, ועליהו לא יבול. וכל אשר יעשה יצליח. לא כן הרשעים, כי אם כמוץ אשר תדפנו רוח. על כן לא יקומו רשעים במשפט, וחטאים בעדת צדיקים. כי יודע אדוני דרך צדיקים, ודרך רשעים תאבד.
Maybe Hashem Miyagur. Okay. Unless you want to do a different one. Okay.
Mizmor LeDavid, Anam Yagur Balecha Mishkon, V'harakat Shecha Halech Tamid Mufel Tzedek, Dover Emes Bilgava Lo Ragal Al Lishono, Lo Asal Reira V'Cherpal and Asal Akravo, Nivzeh Beinav Nimas V'Sirad Yichabed, Nishbal lahara v'lo yamir, Kaspal l'nasad b'neshech, V'shocher al anaki lo lokach, Osei lo yimot liolam.
Rabbi Alman. If you want to do Shir Malas or whatever.
Shir Lama'alos, Esoinai El Horim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri. Ezri Me'im Adonai, Osei Shomayim Va'aretz. Al Yiten Lamot Raglecha, Al Yonum Shomerecha. Hine Lo Yonum V'lo Yishon Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shomerecha, Adonai Tzilecha, Al Yad Yeminecha. Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakeka, V'yareach Baloila. Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra, Yishmar Es Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmar Tzeisecha Uvoecha, Me'atove Ad Olam.
Vayihiyu Chayei Sarah, Me'ah Shana, V'esrim Shana, V'sheva Shanim, Shnei Chaye Sarah. Rashi, as just about everyone in this shul understands and knows, famously comments on the repetition of Shana in the verse and says that Shana is a category of numbers. 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. Each category had to be explained on its own, which Rashi does. The Rav, Zatzal, in a stunning analysis of this Rashi, changes the categories and asserts that each of us goes through, or should go through, 3 phases in our lives that are represented by 100, 20, and 7. 100 is the age of wisdom and experience. 100-year-old people know more than 20-year-old people. One should try to live with the wisdom of old age throughout one's life. On the other hand, 20 is the age of heroism and vigor and strength and resolve. One should live till 100, but hold on to those heroic qualities. 7 is the age of the purity of childhood and unfettered imagination, with the ability to believe and the ability to pray, as only a child is capable of doing. Kulan shavin letova, says the Rav. We need to use the best of each of these categories in every moment of our lives. Harav Meir Moskowitz was a magnificent example of Kulan Shavin L'Tova, living the best of those phases throughout his life. First, he was a Me'ah Shana for as long as we knew him, and I knew him for just about 80 years. Meir was the supreme teacher, the bearer of wisdom of the ages and wisdom of tradition, the supreme educator and mentor. The first time I saw him teaching was when I was a relative kid, just about the oldest camper in Masad. He had just arrived in Masad from Youth Aliyah, one of the people that Shlomo Schulzinger, Zichrono Livracha, brought to camp to bring in a Hebrew spirit into the camp. And Meir was in charge of, some of you will smile, Gananut. Remember Gananut? He was the person who organized the agricultural experience in Masad. And people hated Gananut, but loved the teacher of Gananut. Some of you will recall in the Shir Hituli of those days, in Maccabiyah, the song, Gananut, oi Gananut. I don't remember the words anymore, but you get the idea. It was terrible, but Meir made it happy and joyful. he was interested in gananut. He made it fun. This was in 1948. And before you knew it, he was Rosh Machaneh in Masad Bet, running the whole camp. He came to Ramaz, which was the center of most of his life, from Herzliya, with his partner in crime, Rabbi Joshua Bakst. It was Rabbi Moskowitz who recommended Rabbi Bakst to me, and he said, you got to try to get him to come. And Rabbi Bakst is the next speaker. Rabbi Bakst wanted to speak first. I told him, no. I always speak last at funerals. This time I wanted to speak first because I'm really talking as a member of the family and not as a rabbi. He was an outstanding teacher in the upper school and then a headmaster in the lower school, partnering with Sandy Brickman. The two of them made a very fascinating couple. Think of it. Being able to teach gananut in camp, high school Gemara and Tanakh, Yiddish, Zionism, and then to lead a lower school of young children. You gotta be a special educator to be able to do that. And then in retirement, what did he do? He used to teach people on the phone. Jewish people and non-Jewish people, one of whom is here today, a former teacher in Ramaz. He taught adults on the phone, of course, pro bono, and he had a whole system of private lessons. He was a sage throughout his life with the category of 100 Shana. He also had the heroism and vigor of a 20-year-old. Mayor Moskowitz had charisma. Young people loved him and admired him for his piety, his Zionism, his principles. He had the strength and the resilience to be able to watch at the age of somewhere between 8 and 12, nobody is exactly sure, when his father was taken out of shul in Romania together with the entire congregation and murdered before his son's eyes. And yet, to go on from this horrific moment about which he spoke freely, and to live a life not of moroseness, not of depression, not of crushing sorrow, but a life of joy and fun and positivity and emunah and laughter and honor. He suffered through the Holocaust, unbelievably. He suffered through the struggles of youth aliyah. He suffered through the terribly untimely death of his unforgettable first wife, Sarah, the daughter of the Detroiter Rabbi. I remember Rachi's wedding. At her bedside, Sarah's bedside, they moved, it was Nuni's wedding too. They moved the wedding up because they wanted their mother to be part of the wedding. And yet, there was no trace of anger in this man or depression. Only joy, chayim, simcha, determination, vigor, the heroism of a 20-year-old, Esrim Shana. And finally, he had the belief and the imagination of a child throughout his life. The Rav identified this child, a child who had a childlike quality with the capacity for prayer. The Rav said, prayer requires imagination and emunah, uncomplicated life where you can believe fully and be close to God. Oh, how Rabbi Meir Moskowitz davened. When KJ needed to form an overflow service for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, back, I think it was somewhere in the 1970s, I recruited a group of young members to leave the main synagogue for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and to daven with me in the auditorium where you have just gathered before. And I remember the people I picked out. Some of their children are sitting here in this shul now. The attraction at that davening was a fantastic Baal Tefillah, Meir Moskowitz. He didn't have the voice of Kusavitsky. He didn't have the range of Kopf Kagan, but people loved his davening, his fervor. It was before Mayor Davis came to KJ, by the way. But his father was there. I mean, at the very beginning, his father wasn't there either. People loved his davening, his fervor, his kavanah, his incorporation of Israeli songs. I remember the first time he sang, Ki hinei kachomer biyad hayotzer, to the melody of Be'arvot HaNegev. Ki hinei kachomer biyad hayotzer. Nobody sang it before then. I think he started it. Now, many use that melody. La Brit Habed, la da 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 da. There wasn't a dry eye in that shul. Everyone who heard him wanted to join that service. It was the davening of a child with the emunah and simplicity and purity of an uncomplicated child. Shnei Chaye Sarah, Kulan Shavin Litova. His whole life, so hard, so trial-filled as it was, but also how good and beautiful and inspiring. It ended with 27 years of marriage to Barbara. How great they were together. How much they enjoyed being together. How beautifully they enriched each other's lives. That book of poetry that Meir composed, which was an ode to Barbara. May God bless Barbara for what she brought to Meir's life, even as he was blessed by what he brought to hers. They both, in a sense, saved each other. And may Hashem bless the neshama of Harav Meir ben Harav Avraham Chaim the Shendel Alta, for all the good years, Shnei Chaye Sarah Kulan Shavin L'Tova, that he brought and gave to all of us. Amen.
It's one of the very few times that I got to stand here and address the people. But I have to begin by telling you that I know Rabbi Luxstein well over 50 years. We work together, and I know how he works. I know how talented he is. I did not know that he has nevuah. Nevuah means prophecy. And when I saw him downstairs before we came up here, he said to me, I usually speak last, but I saw your name, so I spoke first because I wanted to make sure. Well, Rabbi, you made sure. I have to tell you, 90% of what he said, I have written here. And I'm not going to repeat it to you. But there's one thing sure, I couldn't possibly do it as well and as articulate as he did. So what could I say? Mayor Moskowitz was a very, very close friend. And as some of my friends refer to him as my brother, because I had brothers, but he was the additional brother. Mayor Moskowitz and I worked together all these years. We worked together in Herzliya as well. He was the head of the Tanakh department, as was mentioned here before, and extremely, extremely talented of working with people. As the rabbi said, I couldn't do it nearly as well. And I am grateful that I had a chance to repeat and thank the rabbi for delivering my speech. And I have to tell you, he did very well. Right. And I would not compete with him, but everything, every word that he said, every note that he called, it was like speaking about Mayor Moskowitz. And let me just add this. He didn't even cover 5% of what Mayor was. The special person that he was, and the 127 years that the rabbi spoke about, they were all the same. He never changed. He built from one step to the next, and it was a Moskowitz. So, being that this is probably the last time that I gave a chance to speak from this pulpit, when I was here, it didn't come to this pulpit, this was for the rabbi. So, I want to tell you all that Mayor and I were very, very much like brothers. We did everything together, cared for one another, helped each other. And all I could say is Baruch Dayan Emet, and wish you all a good day.
Your father was larger than life. He was a legend in his time, who had so much love for others. What a giant he was. His humor and his smile lit up every room he entered. What a powerhouse, a true icon, and a super loving man. These are just a few of the messages that I received yesterday, and then one really special one. When I put on my tefillin every day, I think of your father, who had taught me how to make a perfect shin and a perfect dalet out of my tefillin. My father was all those things, but to me, he was a father. The man who woke me at 5:40 every morning so that we could take one bus and 3 trains to Ramaz so that I could daven Shachris with a minyan every day at 7:15. He was my father who lived so many lives in so many different worlds, whose life was a string of miracles intertwined with joy, sorrow, challenges, simcha, and nachat. He was the man who always chose life. I often wonder if at the age of 8, when his life as he knew it was shattered, could he have known that this is what his life would become? When my father got to Israel after the war, he believed he'd be a farmer, hence the agriculture at Masad, and build a life there. But then he found out that his mother survived the war and was living in New York, and he, of course, moved here to be with her. He married my mother, Aleh Shalom, and together they built a life of chesed, chinuch, and kiruv. My father was the front man, the Pied Piper, who brought home students and campers and others for Shabbos and Simchas Torah so that they could experience life in Borough Park. On any given Simchas Torah, my mother could feed hundreds of teens. My father was the front man, but my mother was the motor that kept the machine running with her charm and her warmth. Here are some of the things that I learned growing up in our home. I learned the mitzvah of kibbud av va'em. As anyone who knew my parents will tell you, the love, honor, and respect that they gave my grandmother was something to behold. She spent every Shabbos, Yom Tov, and gatherings with us, but she also went to every one of my parents' friends' parties and events. My parents treated my other grandparents with reverence and kindness. I learned the mitzvah of hachnasat orchim. The front and back doors of our home were always open, day or night. Sometimes we knew our guests, and sometimes we didn't, and it just didn't matter. All were welcome. Somehow there was always room, there was always food, and there was always a smile. I learned the importance of informal education, and that often the best way to teach is by example. The Friday night tish in our home was always legendary. Abba, here are a few things that you tried to teach me. 1, no matter how many years you're teaching, always prepare your lessons and go into class prepared. You show respect for your students when you do that. 2, always show hakarat hatov, gratitude, to the place and the people that employ you by doing your best, and always, always feel free to learn new things. You taught me about simchat hachayim. No matter the struggles, the challenges, the hardships, get up and put one foot in front of the other. You loved life, and you shared that love with others with your humor and your resilience. You know and you knew that Hashem runs the world. You believed in Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. You taught me that when I get home from work, I should take off my good work clothes. And you taught me the importance of taking care of our bodies. And when you were in your 80s, you still taught a full day, and when you would finish, you'd go swimming, doing your 20 laps in the Y after work. When I finish teaching every day, I go straight home and take a nap in my work clothes. Did my father really know, as a Hasidic boy of 8 from Chernovitz, that one day he'd be teaching at Ramaz and spending his summers at Camp Masad? Probably not. But those institutions enriched his life, and in turn, he was able to enrich the lives of thousands of others by bringing both of his worlds together. My father's life was full of miracles, none of which he took for granted. These last 27 years, Barbara and her children and grandchildren extended his life with their love, devotion, kindness, and Barbara's love for adventure. My father was blessed because not many people can experience that kind of love twice in one lifetime. My father loved Barbara, respected her, admired her, and always followed her lead. Often on Sunday mornings, I would call their house and ask, "So, Abba, what's new?" My father said, "Last night Barbara and I went to the movies." "Nice," I'd say. "What did you see?" And then I'd hear, "Barbara, what movie did we see, and did we like it?" Lucky for my father, Barbara loved to travel, and she took my father to places all over the world, places he never dreamed of, and places he had never been to. And my father would say, "You know, Ruch, Barbara and I are going traveling this summer." "Nice," I'd say. "Where are you going?" And then I'd hear, "Barbara, where are we going this summer?" And it just didn't make a difference, because whenever they were together, they always had a great time. This past year, and especially these last 3 weeks, have not been easy. But this Friday night, my sister-in-law, my niece, and I witnessed a giant miracle. My father wasn't speaking anymore, and yet when we sang Kabbalat Shabbat, he sang with us. And as soon as he was done, he didn't say another word. This past year has been so difficult, but Barbara never gave up. She showered my father with the same love and respect that she showed him all these years. Barbara, you are so special, and may God send you a refuah shlema. Special thanks to those aides who cared for our father as if he was their father. Kamal and Sal, God bless you. To my brother Avi and my sister-in-law Fredi, who brought our father to their home to live with them. Abba used to cry a lot during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening, as he understood the magnitude of what it means to be a shliach tzibur. He found it so difficult to get through the words, Al tashlichenu li'et zikna, kichlot kochenu al tazvenu. Avi, Fredi, Yoel, when he was at his weakest and most frail, the both of you, actually the three of you, were so gentle and attentive and caring. He did reach Eit Zikna, and he was not as strong as he once was, but you and Hashem never left him, not for 1 minute. I'll end this with a special message to Sophie, Holly, Odelia, Ozzy, ETL, Donnie, Akiva, Esty, Dahlia, Rosie, Lily, Abigail, Mimi, Ella, Neely, Noah, Charlie, Gracie, Aria, Aaron, Raphael, Michaela, Yuval, Dylan, Gali, Adi, Isabella, Hank, Nate, Sasha, and Ethan. You know exactly what I'm going to say. Sabarab loves you.
Rabbi Baxt, now I can empathize with you, because I too follow somebody who took my first drasha, my first eulogy away. Luckily, this morning at 5 o'clock, after Fredi warned me that I shouldn't repeat what other people said, I got up and wrote a second version of the eulogy, and that's the one I chose to deliver. So how does a son eulogize a father he was privileged to have for almost 69 years? To be honest, I have no idea. Over the past 6+ years, while my Abba was sick, I have written this eulogy in my head over and over again. But over the last couple of days, when I tried to put the words on paper, the words escaped me. I'm going to do my best to give you some insight into who my father was and the kind of relationship that he and I had, and that he had with my children and my grandchildren. I'm going to try to get through this without crying, but I make no promises. Although today is a very sad day for our family, the Gerstel family, the Ramaz and KJ family, and the Camp Masad family, it's also a celebration of a unique and remarkable man and a life well led. I was talking to my partners before, and I mentioned to them that as a criminal defense lawyer, we often represent people whose lives were derailed by trauma that prevented them from achieving their potential and living productive lives. Today, however, we celebrate the life of my father, Harav Meir ben Harav Avram Chaim, who overcame numerous traumas and tragedies that would have broken a lesser man. He experienced the ultimate evil, but didn't lose faith in God or in the potential of man to be good and to make a good life. We celebrate a man who, with incredible resilience, internal fortitude, and faith in God, built a large and loving family and a career as an extraordinary teacher who left an indelible impression on generations of students, his colleagues, his friends, and virtually anyone who knew him. Now, you've already heard the outlines of my Abba's biography from Rabbi Lookstein and Rabbi Baxt and from my sister, and so I'm not going to repeat that. Instead, I'm going to tell you a few stories about my relationship with my Abba that reflect the nature of that relationship and how he impacted my life. When I sat down to write this, I tried to remember what are my earliest memories of my Abba. And those of you who know me well know that when I was about 3 years old, I was stricken with an ailment called Perthes that made it impossible for me to walk and required me to wear braces on my legs and remain bedridden for 2 years in Blythedale Children's Hospital up in Valhalla. It is from my time in Blythedale that I have my earliest memories of Abba. He visited me every Wednesday when he was off from school. He sat on my bed, read to me in Hebrew, and as a result, I learned to read Hebrew before I read English. And when I started school, my teachers were amazed that I could not only knew the alphabet, but I also knew how to read. I would come home every Shabbat, and Abba would take me back up to the hospital on Sunday afternoon. I remember crying all the way back to the hospital, and Abba trying to hold back his tears as he left me at the hospital for another week. Years later, he gave me a copy of a story he wrote during those years about a young father whose son was ill and how he missed seeing him on his little red fire truck when he came home from work every day. So those of you who know me also know, for the last 55 years since my bar mitzvah, I have been a Bal Koreh, someone who reads the weekly Torah portion in shul. I began reading the Torah every Shabbat right after my bar mitzvah, when the Chernobyl Rabbi, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha, whose grandchildren are here, offered me a job paying $5 a week to read the entire Parsha. And of course, he offered only $3 a week because on Yontif, because the Yontif laning was shorter. After the first year, I realized this was really hard work. So I went to the Rebbe and I said, Rebbe, I want a raise. I want $10 for Shabbat and $8 for Yom Tov. The Rebbe looked at me and said, no. So I said, okay, I'm on strike. And for 3 months, I refused to read. Finally, the Rebbe approached me and said, okay, let's make a compromise. I'll give you $8 for Shabbos and $5 for Yontif. And I said, fine. I accepted. Fast forward 25 years later. I am at the bar mitzvah of the Rebbe's grandson, and his son, Shlomo Twersky, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, says to me, do you remember that time when you went on strike because your father refused to give my father the money to pay you for reading? Till that day, I had not known that my father was paying the Rebbe so that I would learn how to read the Torah. But that's what happened. Now, in my profession as a trial lawyer, I need to know how to argue, how to articulate my position clearly and forcefully, and how to respond to my adversary's arguments. Those are skills that I first learned while sitting at Friday night dinner in my home, where I would debate politics and religion with Abba. As a teenager in the 60s and 70s, I had very strong opinions on virtually everything. Some might say I still do. But no matter what position I took, Abba would take the opposite position. And we would debate and argue at the table all night long, usually ending with me storming away from the table when I couldn't convince him of my position. Only later on, when I became a lawyer, did Abba tell me that he didn't really disagree with me. He was just picking an argument with me so that I would learn how to argue, how to respond to somebody else's arguments, and how to defend the positions that I had when questioned. Now, when I was younger, my relationship with Abba was not always good. I was a very difficult child. I would venture to say the most difficult of the Moskowitz children, although my brothers will definitely disagree with me. They each claim that title. When I got married and matured a bit, my relationship with Abba changed. As Mark Twain famously said, and I'm going to butcher this quote, by the time I reached the age of 25, I wondered how my father, who years ago knew nothing, had suddenly become so smart. As I grew up, Abba and I became very close. I called him every day to ask how his day was, to tell him about mine, to regale him with stories of my children and my grandchildren and his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and to seek his advice. I recall Abba commenting to me on how our relationship had changed when 10 years ago, my son Bensi and I invited him to join us on a boys' trip to Mexico for Bensi's 30th birthday. Now, keep in mind, Abba was 86 at the time, and he couldn't believe that we thought it was a good idea and it was going to be fun to have an 86-year-old tag along with us. He was so happy to be invited, and he could hardly believe his good fortune that we would take him with us. And remarkably, of course, he wanted to do whatever we were doing. And he did, including going ATVing and riding on the back of my ATV, holding on for dear life as we bounced around on the dirt roads. Abba was always interested in learning new things and having new experiences. That is how he ended up snorkeling at the Great Barrier Reef at the age of 80. And for me, one of the most memorable events was taking him at the age of 84, along with Barbara, to see Bruce Springsteen in New Jersey. Now, you have to imagine this scene. I'm sitting at my father's table in Roslyn right before Pesach, and Freddie had already left to Israel, and I said to them, "You know, Abba, I'm going to see Springsteen in a few days." Barbara says, "What a great idea. Can we come?" I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." And she went out and she bought Springsteen's greatest hits CD and played it for a few days so that they could become familiar with the music. On the day of the concert, I met Abba at Penn Station, and it was a scene I'll never forget. He was decked out in a denim vest with studs that he had bought to wear to the concert. We're on the bus from Secaucus to the Meadowlands, and I have to prepare him for what he's about to see. And I explained to him that the custom was, after every song, the audience would yell, "Bruce!" So I said we should practice it on the bus. And there we were, yelling "Bruce" at the top of our lungs in the bus on the way to the concert. Remarkably, we had a great time at the concert. And after the concert, Abba wrote a Hebrew poem about the experience, comparing the relationship of Springsteen and his fans to that of a Hasidic Rebbe and his Hasidim. He saw it as groups of fans and acolytes in almost a religious experience. And that was an insight that only he could have had, because only he could have bridged those two worlds. Now, finally, Abba was a man who loved a good joke, especially one that was a little off color. And he and Rabbi Baxt and Noam Shadafsky, alav shalom, would trade jokes online. And my father loved to tell jokes, but he could never get through a joke without laughing, cracking himself up on the way. One night, shortly after he and Barbara were married, Barbara woke up in the middle of the night because the bed was shaking. And she woke up and she saw my father sitting up in bed laughing. She asked him, "Mayor, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I couldn't sleep, so I began telling myself jokes, and I was laughing and cracking up." Abba was a man of real depth, a Torah scholar and a master teacher who also knew how to laugh and have a good time. He left a lasting impression on all who know him. I want to end by publicly thanking Barbara for the love and devotion that she gave Abba these past 27 years. She made his senior year special by taking such good care of him. She extended his life by years. Barbara, we love you and we are forever in your debt. I also want to thank Abba's doctors and his aides, Kamal and Sal, and my siblings, Yoel and Ruchi, and my wife, Frady, for helping take care of Abba these last few years. Abba, I'm sorry for all the problems I gave you growing up. And I apologize if over the past few weeks I did not show you the proper respect. Please be a Melitz Yosher for your family who loved you so much, and for all Am Yisrael, for whom you davened all those years when you were the Chazan here in KJ on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I love you so much, and I miss you already.
ברוך הנותן לצחביבי נא להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. בוקר טוב, מחנה מסד בית. השעה 6:30. כל אחד נא לקום. and so did Mayor Moskowitz wake up Machaneh Masad Bet Baharei HaPoconos back in my day in the 60s and 70s. Masad was only one of the worlds that Abba inhabited. He was a true intergalactal traveler with one foot in one world at any given moment, and just like that, in another world. In one, for example, he was the Rebbe She'enikel, carrying the torch of the Shotzer Pedayetz Chasidus, singing their nigunim with that accent, davening with their nusach, and telling the stories and folklore still being passed on by his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In another, he was the Moreh Li'ivrit, teaching Beha'avara Sfaradit, Tanakh and Safrut and Dikduk, and quoting Bialik and Peretz and Chernichovsky, Amichai and Appelfeld. In yet another world, he was a Hebraist and a Yiddishist. How he loved and he mastered both of those languages, one his mother tongue and the other his adopted mother tongue. From both, he could spin stories and write poetry that really were the envy of those that were well versed in those languages and the nuances. Hebrew, the Lashon HaKodesh, and Yiddish, the Lashon Shel Kdoshim. He was a dramatist and a chalutz, and also a lover of the United States of America. He made no secret that the U.S. was not where he wanted to plant his flag and build a life after the Shoah. Eretz Yisrael was. That's where he wanted to be reborn. And he was blessed to start the process, mastering Hebrew, learning agriculture, finding love, but it was not to be. After learning of his mother's survival and his subsequent arrival in New York, he came to these shores to reunite with the rest of his family. And here in America, a land he grew to love and be forever grateful to, he found love again, built a family, and started a career in Jewish Hebrew education that impacted thousands of lives. Mayor Moskowitz was a father figure to thousands of young Jews, but as is often the case with leaders, he left 4 orphans at home. We had to share Abba's time with parent-teacher conferences, lesson planning, test grading, paper marking, summer camp bunking and planning, and so on and so forth. So I fear I'm painting a picture here of an idealistic workaholic who was always serious. But Abba wouldn't want me to do that. He would want us to celebrate his life with laughter and song, which we've been doing till now. And so for the next few minutes, I'd like to do a little bit of both. But there's no celebration of Mayor Moskowitz's life without acknowledging 2 women whose support made Mayor Mayor. My mother, Sue, of course, and for the past 30 years, the incredible Barbara, who has been the single greatest life force that supported, encouraged, and enhanced every aspect of his life, professional, personal, and familial. She joined his life and she embraced his worlds, especially the Ramaz KJ world where we're sitting today. She literally took him, Michoshech le'or, v'hamivin yavin. Or as I like to say to Abba once in a while, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. She had single-handedly willed him back to life as death stared him in the face, and honestly, he was sometimes willing to go. But even the angel of death is afraid to argue with Barbara. Somewhere she has a collection of notebooks with precise instructions and prescriptions and diagnosis from every doctor appointment, listing every treatment and every scenario that could happen. And armed with that data, Barbara would stare the Malach HaMavet in the face and say, no, not today. The doctor said if we do this and we do that and we follow this procedure, we get a few more years. It was sort of a joke amongst the Moskowitz children. When Abba came so close to the end, and we wondered, how did he rally again this time? And the joke was, well, he couldn't go. Barbara hadn't scheduled his funeral yet. During COVID, Abba fell ill again, and we really thought that the end was near, and he rallied. And once again, we found some humor in it. So why didn't Abba pass away during COVID? Well, during COVID, all the funerals were graveside with 10 people, social distancing, and streaming. And he said, no, I want KJ. Well, he got it. And I look around, and he'd have been really, really proud of this crowd. He did good. So thank you all for filling up the room and giving him his kavod achron. I'm heartened that Abba got the send-off he deserves. So Abba loved to laugh and joke around, but Avi almost took my thunder away, but he left me some room here. But he couldn't finish a joke because he could never get through telling it. Now, those of you who know Abba, he was also a bit of a physical comedian, so I'll get to that in a second. He would start a joke, and then as he's getting towards the punchline, he'd get into a heaving laugh. And he wouldn't finish the joke. So, some years ago, before Barbara came in, and this was really before cell phones, before even like caller ID, Abba called me up one Motzei Shabbat, and he said to me, I wanna go rent a movie. Can you recommend something to me? And I said, do you want to laugh? And he said, always. So I recommended that he go out and rent The Producers with Zero Mostel, who he loved, and Gene Wilder. And a few hours later, my phone rings. And I pick up the phone, hello, and all I hear on the other end is, so I got the message that he liked the movie. He never told me, that was it. He was also known as an elaborate practical joker. There's one famous story for people in the know. He and Noam Shadovsky had the Rosh Bama, the drama counselor in Camp Masad Bet, make them up, and they drove from Masad Bet to Masad Aleph, posing as diplomats from Bhutan, of all places, presumably to declare their nation's love of the Jewish people in Israel. And all was going really well. Noam's uncle, Shlomo Schulzinger, the camp director, and Noam's mother, the head of the kitchen, didn't recognize either of them and were buying into it. They gathered all the campers around to sing for the VIPs, and all was going well until Noam's mother, Bilha, who was a very, very animated personality, began insisting that these important diplomats see her kitchen. You must see my kitchen. You must see my kitchen. Abba, at the time, sporting dental work performed on him in British Mandate Palestine by a Russian survivor dentist, included some gold and silver and undeterminate color, began to laugh. And Bilha recognizes him and points at him and says, Zemeu. And her own son is standing right there, and she doesn't recognize him at all. Over the years, by the way, whenever there was a story about Bhutan in the newspaper, they would cut it out and send it to each other in interoffice mail with a secret sign-off from the diplomats in Bhutan. With the benefit of hindsight, I appreciate the exposure that I had to Abba's rainbow coalition of cultures and worlds. I confess that as a child, it was confusing to me. And I never fully understood at the time what he wanted of me. Abba loved to say that Yiddishkeit was not a cafeteria plan, but there was no bigger smorgasbord than Abba's version of Yiddishkeit. Abba always wanted me to become a Talmud Chacham, sorry, and I wanted him to be Ward Cleaver. Ultimately, we compromised. Abba had a love of pshat. I'll explain it later. The text doesn't lie, he was fond of saying. If Shlomo HaMelech took 1,000 wives and he participated in Avodah Zarah, well, it's in the text. The Torah isn't hiding anything. If Yehuda was with Tamar, it's in the text. They weren't hiding anything. They were human beings, Yoel, he used to tell me. So I'm going to give you just a little shot on Mayor Moskowitz. Avi alluded to it a little bit. When I was growing up, he was a tough guy, disciplinarian, and he set pretty high standards that admittedly I didn't always live up to. And truthfully, he wasn't so warm and fuzzy back then. Affection was as rare as a buffalo nickel. But there's Rashi and Tosfot, and they draw a different picture of Mayor Moskowitz. An insight into what made him, to me, in my eyes, my hero, my idol, and really a great man. He knew that the first 20 years of our relationship was complex, but he spent the next 40 plus years making up for it. Much of the edge that he had was because Abba wanted the best for me. But the Shoah had ended less than 20 years when I was born, before I was born. I was the fourth child. He was a school teacher, and my mom at the time was a homemaker. The pressure that he carried, the history that he carried, must have been a burden no human being should have to endure. But somehow he made it work. He had 2 or 3 jobs, never took a vacation. He made it work. And we, truthfully, never lacked for anything. He kind of kept it all together with smoke and mirrors and duct tape. And somehow or another, with all of that, he seemed to have leftover funds to have guests every Shabbat, to preside over the Shalashudas Club, if you know, you know, where he got to be the Rabbi of his own small flock for a few hours. Like I said, our Shabbat and holiday table was never without guests. And this is true. Each one of us Moskowitz children at some point had a roommate who just happened to show up at our door, usually from Israel, who stayed for a few days, weeks, months, and there were a couple for years. When Shira and I moved in to our first house, I was maybe 30, sending our kids to yeshiva, and both of us were working multiple jobs just to keep it together. Sound familiar? It hit me how hard Abba had to work to keep it together. And like Avi was saying, I was 30 before I realized just how smart he was and how hard he worked and how he had to juggle all of that to keep us going. While the Shoah explains and forgives so much, Abba's resilience, sorry, I didn't learn it all by heart, and perseverance explains so much more. And he had to do it all on instinct because he had no one to show him the way. All of that was taken from him. Mayor Moskowitz, as Rabbi Lookstein alluded to, bounced back from every tragedy stronger than before. From the Shoah, from losing his mother to ALS after years of suffering. And of course, the loss of my mother Sue after 25 years of marriage. She was not yet 46. Incidentally, Abba to his last day said that losing Sue was the greatest of all of those tragedies. And still, he came back to life and lived life the fullest. I've told my kids multiple times that the smartest thing I ever did in my life was listen to my father. I didn't always agree. I didn't always follow his advice, but I listened because his perspective was unparalleled. Whatever success I have in life, and the greatest of them is my marriage to Shira, whom he adored. By the way, he says, I'm just going to get off on a tangent for a second. Regarding my being married to Shira, he always said to me that I had more mazel than seichel. One other thing, Shira and I got married after a very, very, very brief courtship. I guess it's the Hasidic style in me. And the first time Shira met Abba was at Purim Suda. And I told him, I'm bringing this girl home. Her name is Shira. She's from California. And that's all I told him about her. And I introduced Shira to Abba, and he starts talking to her in Hebrew. He just assumed that she's going to talk Hebrew back, which he did, by the way. She's perfectly fluent. But I'm wondering, if she had failed the test, would I still be married to Shira today? So going back to my successes in life, not too many, but the wife part and my three really incredible kids and the way they were brought up, I attribute 100% to his guidance. And the truth is, I and my kids, and probably my siblings as well, not only had a father, but we had a spiritual advisor, a spiritual leader. Abba officiated at my wedding. He was the Masada Kedushin. And we had the zchut, the privilege, that Abba married Samantha to Michael and Noah to David. And I have to note that for Noah's wedding, he literally came to the wedding from the hospital bed. Again, his resilience, and again, Barbara willed him to strength. And at the wedding, no one would have begrudged him a walker, a wheelchair, or even a chair to sit in. But he refused. He walked down the aisle with Barbara. He stood for the whole ceremony. He spoke, addressed the Chatan and Kala. And here again, if you know my father, you know, he had the presence of mind while the ceremony was going on to do one of his famous at Meshulam, who was standing and I guess blocking someone's view. Told you he was a physical comedian. I've heard it said about Holocaust survivors that there are those that did not die and those that came back to life. Mayor Moskowitz came back to life, and he lived it with a vengeance. I want to quote a song that I found that really describes Mayor Moskowitz's life. I am not going to translate, so if you want, you can find me afterwards. כשיגיע היום להזדכות, השומר יבקש שאומר כמה מילים אחרונות לפני שהשער נסגר. הייתי רוצה לסכם, היה כדאי בלב שלם, חייתי את חיי, לחיות בלי חרטות, או לפחות לנסות להיות מאושר עד כמה שאפשר, ולחיות את הזמן שנשאר, לפני שהשער נסגר. And I want to end the way Abba would have wanted it to end, in song. I'm going to play a recording of Meir singing, and I'm going to ask everybody to please join in to the Pizmon and to the chorus. Eliyahu, Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yoel, notice I lifted up the mic. I could say that he's my brother from another mother. I'm Barbara's son, John. Sadly, she couldn't be here today, as she's still recovering up at Burke Rehabilitation. Thankfully, she's getting better each day. Mom and the rest of my family watching with you. I know you all wanted to be here, and we miss you. I'm honored to speak here today, representing her and my entire family, sharing what made Meir so very special to all of us. They had quite a beginning together. They met in the summer of 1996, when they each led a group on a March to the Living trip through the concentration camps. My mother was leading a group from Temple Beth Shalom, a conservative synagogue in Roslyn, Long Island. She specifically requested to share a bus with Ramaz because she felt they would be a welcoming group to her less observant students. As the two leaders, Mom and Meir spent long hours together. None of us are sure exactly when it turned into a romance. It was a courtship that may have had a few rules broken. 2 years later, after my mother proposed to Meir, they were married. She said, "Why don't we get married already?" He said, "Yes, and I should have done it a long time ago." Who would have thought a conservative Jewish woman from Long Island and an Orthodox rabbi from the city would ever make such an incredible couple? He opened up a whole new world to her, and she opened up one to him. One of my mom's most cherished memories was their Shabbos table Friday night, with Meir in his black chalat and my mom in her designer pants and silk blouse. That was them. He would sing Eshet Chayil to her, and they would both tear up. They came from very different backgrounds and religious upbringings, but he truly accepted our family as we were and never judged us. His love for Judaism and Israel was infectious, and we soaked it all up. For someone whose life began so tragically, he somehow spent his last 80-plus years choosing light over dark, joy over sorrow, and hope over despair. My mom told me yesterday that he used to come to Ramaz early to be available for students who needed extra help. He felt if they wanted to learn, he would be there for them. He also came early to watch the buses of Jewish children coming to school each morning, feeling with great pride that the Jewish people had survived the Holocaust. He joined our family officially 27 years ago, and right away treated me, Beth and Amy, and our spouses like his own children, and our 8 kids and their spouses as his own grandchildren. He took them all to the matzah factory when they were young, even though most of them hated shmura matzah. He made them taste it. He made them taste it. He took the boys to get their tefillin down the Lower East Side. He never missed one of their birthdays, concerts, graduations, or simchas. He was a grandfather to them like he was their blood. The grandchildren shared some stories of him with me this week. Avi, I had to take out the laughing in bed at night. My mom actually thought she was experiencing an earthquake when the bed started shaking. He found himself very funny. The kids remember him wearing a ridiculously hideous yellow polka dot shirt on Purim, bragging about what a bargain it was. I was also reminded of how my mom, in the last few years, cut him off from his favorite drink, vodka. But the kids would slip him shots, even after Grandma Barbara told him not to drink anymore. He would wink at them, and they knew exactly what that meant. They said he was meant to be a Saba. He knew everything about each grandchild, their likes, dislikes, hobbies, and goals, and he would support anything they were passionate about, even if he didn't feel the same way. My cousin Shelley always loved his smile and the way he said Babara. He liked that name much better than her Hebrew name Bela, which he made fun of by calling her Baila. Mostly what I'll remember is his incredible smile and the light he brought into our lives. He and my mother found another love later on in their lives, and we're all so grateful. Mayor's children shared some beautiful thoughts this week. Their marriage was a real love affair that inspired us all. Barbara saved him, loved him, cared for him, and brought him pure joy. So next time you drink some vodka, toast him for all the wonderful lives he touched. We love you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isaac Winkler. I am the son of Rabbi Moskowitz Winkler, and I was Rabbi Meir Moskowitz's grandson. He was my Saba, and my daughter is Saba Rabba. So my grandfather lived a whole life before I joined the story, so I'm really just going to start with my memories, because you got to hear all the good stuff from his friends. When I was young, my memories of my Saba were of a man who showed up occasionally with toys, generally the kind of toys that when you put in warm water would expand. My family, mostly Yoel, would make fun of him for bringing these toys, but I love them, and to this day, when my kids get a toy that grows in water, I think of my Saba. Many years later, Saba would explain to me that he wasn't really able to get toys for us, and so when he would come, he would quickly pick something up on the street corner before hopping on the subway to not come empty-handed. I would not say that we were particularly close at this time in my life, but he was a regular presence. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity and sit and learn with him for my bar mitzvah, though I wouldn't say that I felt lucky about it at the time. My Saba, as most people mention, was an educator, and learning Torah and all subjects was something he took very seriously, and I can't say that as a 12-year-old I felt the same. We had a very respectful relationship, but something always kept us from connecting on a deeper level. That is, until Barbara entered the scene. I still remember meeting Barbara, or at least what I believe to be the first time I met Barbara, at my sister's bat mitzvah, and Saba and Barbara arrived in a red sports car. Barbara was wearing a red suit with red lipstick and was 100% fabulous, and Saba was beaming. I didn't reference any photos, so don't hold me to that memory, but in my head, that's how it happened. Now, little did I know that this would be the start of a real deep relationship with my Saba. I still remember him getting upset at me when I told him that our relationship flourished because of Barbara. I think he was offended at the idea that our close relationship couldn't exist without her, and well, the truth is it kind of just didn't. The way I tried explaining it was like a science experiment. We were just two compounds with similar properties that didn't really react when together. And then Barbara came, and she was the catalyst that created this reaction. And because of that, my personal relationship with my Saba was able to flourish. My Saba and I were family, but we didn't really have any overlapping interests until Barbara. We were both totally head over heels for Barbara, and because we had this mutual interest, we found a common bond that allows us to start sharing and spend time together, and we started working to identify other common interests that we had. It turns out we both loved to travel, we loved a good drink with a great dinner, even though Saba did not drink, and we both appreciated the beauty of the world. So yes, Saba, it is because of Barbara that you and I got to not only be related, but become friends in our adult years. You see, Barbara, for those of you who don't know, is a fixer of problems. And most of you in this room have spent time in this family, so I'm not ashamed to say that we may have one or two problems. Now, for some reason, Barbara, this very special human, decided that my Saba was so wonderful that she was even willing to take on the rest of us to be with him. And I think the family never openly said thank you to Barbara because we were scared that if we did, she would realize that we still couldn't believe that someone so healthy and seemingly normal wanted to join our family, and well, we really didn't want her to run away. So Barbara decided to take our family with Saba on a trip to Israel. Was it chaotic? Yes. Was it amazing? Yes. Was it a memorable once-in-a-lifetime experience? Absolutely. And it was only possible because of Barbara. Barbara, you schlepped this man around the world. At first, I imagine it felt like schlepping, but slowly and surely, he started to see the joy himself and was excited for the trips. I still remember how excited he would get before all of your seemingly endless, nonstop back-to-back cruises. You inspired each other, and I often think of the collage of pictures that you took of Saba davening in beautiful locations around the world. To me, this is the encapsulation of your relationship. Two happy people who loved each other, loved Judaism, the Jewish people, and who wanted to celebrate the world that God created and trying to take in as much of its beauty as possible. When Saba was in the hospital a few years ago over a yontif, I spent the day with him, and honestly, I thought I was saying goodbye for the last time. And while we sat together, he told me that he was not afraid of dying, but that he was fighting to stay with Barbara. Barbara, Saba loved you and always only wanted what was best for you. I don't think for 1 minute he could have ever imagined being so lucky that such a beautiful, kind, caring individual would choose to spend her life with him. Barbara, you showed him what joy looked like and how to experience it. How lucky you both were to spend 27 joyful years together. The kindness that you two showed each other during your marriage is something that I try to emulate every day in my own marriage. Yesterday, when I told my daughter, Rosie, that her Saba Rabba had died, we both cried. And then Rosie said, I didn't know it was going to be the last time I was going to say goodbye. And I said, I didn't know either. I held her and we cried some more. And then I said, I'm just pointing out that you said I've never cried, so this is me crying, and I told you only do when something is really sad, so this is that really sad thing. And yes, it was very sad because the world lost a very special human, but I can't help take solace in thinking of how many lives were touched by his existence. From teaching generation of Jewish children to telling his truth so that the world never forgets the Holocaust, he always did what he believed was right. That is a lesson I see passed down in all of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. I will end with some advice that people have already said, and it's nice to know that, he was true to himself. Around his 90th birthday, I said, Saba, with everything you've been through, what is your secret to it all? He said, there is no secret, just put one foot in front of the other. Saba, it feels a little harder to do that today here without you. But I will keep putting one foot in front of the other, and in your honor, I will remind all those who loved you to do the same, and never forget that Saba Rabba loves you.
Where do I even begin? I stand here with so much pride, knowing I had the privilege of being one of Saba's 15 grandchildren. Saba was the patriarch of our family, but also a true Jewish leader, Holocaust survivor, educator, camp director, friend, author, and scholar. He was truly one of a kind, came from Hasidic roots, yet lived his life as a modern Orthodox Zionist rabbi with a love for the Hebrew language and Israel. Saba saw his father shot by the Nazis, escaped a concentration camp, lost his wife at a young age, yet he was the most spiritually, deeply connected person that I have ever known. I have always admired the fact that he never lost faith or belief in God despite it all. In fact, one of the things that will stick with me forever is when Saba would always say, "I'm not God's policeman," referring to the fact that his relationship with God is his own, and it's not his job to tell anyone else what to do or believe. Now, if I'm just being honest, growing up, Rabbi Meir Moskowitz was definitely God's policeman. He would let me know if my skirt was too short, which was often, ask my brother if he put on his tefillin, nudge him about wearing a kippah, and give my siblings and cousins looks if we tried to escape the Passover Seder early that would go on for hours in the night. If you know, you know. He was the ultimate policeman. But of course, when you have 15 grandchildren and they all go on their own paths, the role of God's policeman naturally changes. Ultimately, the most important value Saba wanted from us was to be proud Jews with strong family values and a love of Yiddishkeit. Saba influenced thousands of people. Since yesterday, many of his former students reached out sharing anecdotes, telling me how much they loved him and the impact he had on their lives. Saba devoted a significant portion of his adult life to ensuring that his experience during the Holocaust would live on for generations to come. He strongly believed that if these stories were not shared, over time they would be disappeared and forgotten. As a teacher in a new school, I was recently asked to speak to the upper school students on National Holocaust Remembrance Day in January and share his story. They then connected me with Generation Forward, who trained second and third generation Holocaust survivor descendants to speak and share their family survivor stories, as we are sadly losing more each year. It was important to me that I share this with Saba. It was becoming clear that he was reaching his time, and I wanted him to know I'm going to do everything to ensure his story and legacy will be carried on for multiple generations. On Sunday, my daughter and I were heading home from South Jersey, and I received a call from my mother that it wasn't looking too good with Saba. We immediately made the decision to drive to Long Island to see him. Deep down, I knew it was going to be goodbye. When I got to West Hempstead, Saba was not responsive. He couldn't move. I hung around for a while, and when it was finally time to go, I gave him a big hug and told him that I had been given the opportunity to share his story with students in my school, and that I wasn't going to stop there. I'm going to share his story with many people and continue his mission of never forgetting. He suddenly turned his weak head towards me, and we locked eyes and held hands. I knew right there he understood exactly what I was saying, and it was his way of passing the torch. Saba, ani etz gageach lecha, ve'ani lo eshkach et hasipor shelcha. Saba, ani ohevet otcha. Thank you.
For my entire life, my Saba has been a huge inspiration to me. When I was in elementary school, I was given an assignment where I had to write an essay about my hero. I started by writing, "My hero is my Saba because he survived the Holocaust and is really strong and brave." Fast forward to high school, where I had the privilege of being Saba's student at Ramaz. For the first 3 years, I wasn't in any of his classes, but senior year, when we got to choose which courses to take, I chose his Parshat HaShavua class. Many of my classmates asked me why I chose that class. Isn't it weird to have your grandpa as your teacher, they'd ask? Maybe to some, I thought, but I wasn't going to pass up the only opportunity to learn under him in a classroom setting. For what it's worth, there was no nepotism in his grading. I was his highest performing family member who has taken his class, and I got a flat B. It might have even been a B-, honestly. 3 years ago, for our wedding, David and I had assigned Saba to the role of Masader Kedushin. Right before the big day, he had to be admitted to the hospital due to unforeseen health complications. Everyone was scrambling to figure out a new plan for the ceremony, but he and I both refused to believe that he wasn't going to make it. We had faith. In a miraculous turn of events, he was discharged from the hospital on my wedding day and basically came straight to the ceremony. The energy that evening was palpable, and not just because it was my wedding night, but because a true miracle had occurred. Needless to say, Saba was not one to miss any of the special moments in life. When my amazing daughter Sasha was born, he was the first family member to meet her in the hospital in Florida, along with my grandmother Barbara. I will thank God and cherish that moment forever. Saba, I'm going to miss your magnetic energy and hilarious sense of humor. I'll never forget all the times we laughed together. There was usually some Yiddish involved, and always your signature chuckle. My dad did a little better, but it's fine. Lastly, there are 2 values you taught me that I will continue to implement in my life every single day. 1, be proud to be Jewish. In a world as crazy as this one, I never have and never will hide who I am. I encourage everyone here to do the same. 2, always be grateful. Having gratitude for even the smallest of things is truly an act of tikkun olam. Looking at the bright side of things like you did undoubtedly makes the world a better place. I promise to continue to build upon your legacy and share those principles with the world. I know it meant a lot to you, and it will always mean a lot to me. I wish I was able to tell you that in person, but I know you're here now, and you'll be with me always. I love you so much, and I'll always miss you. And then we also have a small note from our brother who's in Israel. And in typical Micah fashion, he says, I know a lot of people, when they remember Saba, will associate him with religion and his experience in the Holocaust. But I hope he's also remembered and appreciated for his sense of humor and his style. The guy loved to laugh, he loved a verbringen, and he was pretty damn cool. I'm gonna miss you, Saba. Love always, Micah.
Shehecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Not just because I'm the last speaker, but because those are the words that Saba would say at every family gathering. One of my earliest memories was Pesach at Ramat Rachel in 2004. Saba and Barbara brought us all down to a small Beit Knesset, and at the outset of his opening remarks, the room started to fill with tears as he recited the bracha, as he always did. As an outsider, it seemed kind of strange, but I slowly started to understand all the nuanced and complex meanings behind that bracha. Sometimes that bracha would turn into a joke at family gatherings, knowing that the bracha was going to come. But for Saba, that bracha of Shehecheyanu was so deep, and it was so ripe with hakaras hatov. It's a bracha he made because he never fully felt settled, living in constant uncertainty. Never did he imagine that the young boy who watched his father murdered by the Nazis, Yamach Shemo, who jumped off of a train heading to the concentration camp and instead hid with his mother in the forest, would one day marry and start a family. Never did he imagine that he would be privileged to teach thousands of students in the summers at Camp Masad and for 53 years at Ramaz. And after losing Savta Sarah to breast cancer at such a young age, never did he imagine that he would get to play, to teach, and learn with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Oh, how the tears flowed when his first great-grandchild was born on Yud Bet Tammuz, the yortzeit of his father. That is why he said Shehecheyanu. Like a seasonal fruit that receives this special bracha, every milestone for Saba wasn't just new, It was a gift from Hashem he didn't feel he deserved. But there was one gathering where Saba flipped the script. 12 years ago, Saba and Barbara took all the grandchildren on a week-long cruise to Bermuda, all except for Mr. Contraband. It was the most amazing trip. On Erev Shabbos, in the room, he gathered everyone together to share a few words. And he said the following words with tears. Modeh ani lefanacha Hashem Elokai v'Elokei avosai, al kol hachesed asher asita imadi, v'asher ata atid la'asot imi, v'im kol b'nei veiti. I never asked him why he didn't say Shechianu. The truth is, I didn't want to. I had formed my own opinion and didn't want him to tell me something that would ruin the meaning I found in it. In my mind, on that trip, Saba was made whole. In that moment, Saba no longer felt like a prisoner who was constantly running from one thing to the next, not knowing how the story would end. He was free. He was at peace. Life was no longer lived in a state of shock and uncertainty, but in a quiet appreciation for the journey and what was still to come. He had made it, and he got to dance the night away surrounded by his grandchildren. For him, these last 12 years have been icing on the cake. Writing, journaling, traveling, and working on his act as Mayor the Magnificent. And what an amazing privilege it was for him and for us to see him learn with his great-grandchildren for their bar and bas mitzvahs. And what joy he got when they called him every Erev Shabbos. And when he saw Sophie and Akiva in their IDF uniforms, he'd tear up again and he would say, Zachinu, Zachinu. Safta Barbara, you are the best thing to happen to Saba and the entire Moskowitz family. Your love and devotion to him and to all of us has been so normal, it's extraordinary. You have an amazing gift of understanding, of wisdom, and of buying the coolest sports cars. Refuah Shalema. We love you always, and we will never leave your side. 11 years ago, Saba gave his last lecture at Ramaz. Safta Barbara and Ruchi and I were there to experience it. And I recorded his final message, which is still on my cell phone. On his way out of Ramaz, he wanted his students to retain one final message for life. As Saba takes leave of Ramaz one final time, I want to share it with all of you so that his instructions remain very much alive within us every single day. He wrote on the whiteboard, Bereshit. And I know in my family, you're thinking that he's going to be talking about the pigeon Aben, but he's not. He wrote, Bet is bracha. God should bless you with everything that is good for you. Not necessarily what you want, but what God wants for you. Reish is Reishit Chachma Yirat Hashem. Remember who you are and where you are going. It's not just about fear of God, but awe of God. Aleph is Osher v'Ahava. I wish you all happiness and love. Love for Torah, love for humanity, and love for yourself. Because you can't possibly love another person without knowing self-love. Shin is Simcha. Enjoy life. Simchat Chayim, a joyful life, and Chayim Shel Simcha, a life of joy. Yud, Yehudi Ge'eh. Be a proud Jew. Don't hide your identity. You have a lot to be proud of. And Tuf is Torah. Live a life of Torah. To be respectable B'nai Torah, there's nothing greater. And then he concluded with the second tough and began to tear up. Tough is also Todah. I have no words to thank God for the privilege of teaching so many students. To you, Saba, we also say Todah for the privilege we have had to be your grandchildren, to learn with you, to sing with you, to dance with you, to play pie face, to watch you joke with the kids about pineapple, apple, pen, and most importantly, to love you. You told the students, Saba, that your 53 years teaching at Ramaz was equal to the gematria of Gan. For 90 plus years, you were a gardener, watering and nurturing thousands of Jewish souls that sprouted into the most beautiful flowers. And now, in appreciation for your service, you will be welcomed into a new Gan, Gan Eden Mikedem, where your soul will be nurtured by the glow of Hashem's presence, surrounded by the holy tzaddikim of Shatz, Pedayet, Zlochev, Zidachoiv, Linitz, Lubavitch, and so many more. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Please rise.
למולי רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצי מנוח נכונו, על כנפי השכינו, ממעלוס, קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הורקיה מזהירים, אס נשמס רב מאיר בן רב אברום חיים, שהולך לעולמו. בעבור שמשפחתו מתפללים ונודרים לצדוקו ביד הזכורס נשמוסו בגן עדן תהי מנוחסו לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בססר כנפיו לעולמים, בצרור בצרור החיים אס נשמוסו. אדוני הוא נחלוסו, ינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
The coffin, which is outside in the hearse, because of the fact that this is a school and there are students who are Kohanim, and we can't take them out of the building. We will all now, you're invited to come downstairs, to go out into the street, put your coats on, and those of us who can will follow the coffin to Park Avenue. And from that point on, the coffin will be taken to JFK Airport. So please remain standing in your places while the family leaves the building first.
Just as we're leaving, we're asking everyone to go out the wooden doors because it's now pickup for the students. So we'll go downstairs and go through the wooden doors that are right below us.